I didn't always listen to others. I didn't always get a different point of view. I thought, I know what I'm doing or whatever. And so people called me out on it, and they rightly did. Part of what I learned in a leadership role is that you're probably better off having smarter people than you on your team.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm Megan Henry, your host today by myself, and I have on Jay Carlton, who is the VP of Casualty and Workers' Comp Claims at State Auto Insurance. And he and I talked a few weeks ago. We just had a great conversation, and I thought I'd bring him on to talk about, his journey to State Auto and, their philosophy on how they handle claims and what they look for in counsel, which is everything we want to hear. So with that said, I will bring him in. Hey, Jay, thanks so much for coming on to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm really excited to have you on this morning. How are you?
I'm good, Megan. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So if I recall, I think you're in Ohio right now?
Yeah, in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. So are you getting out of, the second round of winter and starting to see the signs of spring?
We were, and then this week it's gotten cold again. I sat outside at a softball game last night with my daughter and froze my what. And, so you never know. I mean, I've lived in the Midwest. I lived in Missouri for a while. I lived in Ohio, and you never know what weather you're going to get coming. So I'm hopeful, and, it's getting better to at least get outside and do some stuff. But there's still, I think, a few cold days ahead. So I'm ready for the sun.
Yeah, I mean, we had like this little splice of beautiful weather, and now it's like 45 degrees. So
yeah, no, it was last week it was like almost 80, and I'm sitting outside at my daughter's game in like shorts and flip flops. And then yesterday I literally had 4 layers of clothes on and a blanket, and I was still cold.
Right. Well, so I want to get it. I mean, you are the VP of Casualty and Workers' Comp Claims at State Auto, and I want to dive into that a little bit later. But first, I think we all need to get to know you a little bit. But you're a lawyer.
I am.
But did you I know when I was in college, I didn't intend to be a lawyer. I just ended up in law school. Was that something that I think you had mentioned that you were in broadcast journalism. So is it something was a part of your plan?
So when I was growing up, I really wanted to be a play-by-play announcer for sports teams. And I did some of that stuff in high school, and kind of was into it, and thought I wanted to go to broadcast and to be in broadcast journalism. And so law school was always kind of in the back of my mind at some point. I mean, I always liked it, but I intended to go be a broadcast journalism, got into it, decided journalism was not for me. And at that point in time, I made the decision, I'd always thought about going to law school. And so I did. Obviously, you make decisions and things kind of turn out for the better, usually, hopefully. So I practiced law for a couple of years out of Kansas City, did insurance defense litigation for a couple of firms, which I enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed trial work. I did some first year, some smaller auto trials or whatever, and all that stuff, and doing the grunt associate work and all that good stuff, and learned a ton. But then an opportunity came to go into an in-house, working with, at the time, was Employers Reinsurance Company, which later became, actually it was GE Insurance Solutions and then Swiss Re. So we had several name changes. But anyway, started handling claims there. I actually started out doing insurance agent E&O claims, which is kind of where I cut my teeth. Then moved to reinsurance side. So that kind of got me the feel of the kind of the corporate insurance side of the house, which actually, I tell a lot of people I intended to kind of go back into law. At some point I thought I would see myself go back working at a firm. And I really actually thought working on the insurance side of it would make me a better lawyer, as far as working with insurance companies, as to for what they need, what they're looking for from me, understanding the insurance side of the business. To be honest with you, I think that's one thing I would encourage attorneys to do that do insurance defense and work with insurance companies, really understand how the business kind of runs and what they need, especially from a reserving perspective and all that, because it gave me an insight as to really why they're asking for me these reports so soon, and why they have these timelines and all that, because it's important for my team, because we're judged on how timely we're doing things. And when we're pushing attorneys to get that information to us, it's super important. So I actually learned quite a bit of that. And then, so my intent was to go back into potentially into practice, but things kind of progressed and, kind of start moving up the ladder a little bit. And it just kind of felt like, maybe this is the right spot for me.
Well, and you got away from, the billable hour.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. That was a big factor too. For your weekends, the stress. I mean, you get used to the corporate life. I tell people there's also moments where I have dreams where I've maybe gone back to work in practice and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? I wake up and, I'm like, oh, geez, it's a dream. Thank goodness. But again, I had every intention to, but you just kind of get used to what it is. And you utilize, I use my legal skills and what I learned as I analyze stuff. So it's been super helpful. And now I don't envision myself going back anytime soon.
I still have those dreams that I have the dream that I'm like, at the end of my semester and I didn't go to class,
You didn't go the whole time. Yeah.
And the thing is, what's so funny is like, I didn't miss classes in school.
I'm the same way. Either that or you haven't prepared for the test. But yeah, the one where you like don't go to class and then I can remember thinking, my parents are going to see the F on my grade, my grade semester, whatever, and they're going to be like, what the heck? And I'm like, didn't even know I had the class, or something like that.
Right. So I like your point though, that you had intended to go back. Cause I think, it is really true that when you're a young litigator, you're learning just how to litigate, but you don't understand at all what's going on on the other side of the door. You just are trying to learn, like, how do I do my job? And you don't get the business part. So, and I think you learn that as you go, but having to step on the other side, you really get a clear idea, like, this is really what they're looking for, other than asking. Of course, you can always ask your clients what they're looking for, but it makes you more aware of, I think, how you handle your own cases when like what the benchmarks are. Yeah,
I think I think it would have been a real benefit for me had I decided to go back. And again, I've talked to other attorneys that have done work. I mean, the more you can understand, obviously we have really good attorneys, so it's not like, they don't know what they're doing, but understanding the other side of the house really makes a huge difference, I think. And you would think and maybe tailor what you're doing. Obviously, their job is to defend the policyholder, which is first and foremost there, but still understanding that communication with the carrier and why they need things and when they need things, and why the evaluation is so important. Because I look at it when I get an evaluation or my team gets an evaluation, to be honest, I take that into consideration as never the final thing. But from a reserving perspective, from an insurance side of the house, I have to look at that and try to evaluate that, because from a reserving perspective, that's where the money matters to my side. And so that has a downstream effect that, again, I don't know if counsel really understands. So the more they can kind of understand that and realize it, I think it will help them at least be more communicative, better informed. And I think it would only honestly probably strengthen the relationship a little bit between like panel counsel and the carrier.
And I think like the issue of reserves is something that doesn't get explained very well, especially to young attorneys. Like when I had no idea what reserves
I didn't either.
Were. I would see them on the sheet and I'm like, okay, like, and being a young attorney, I'm like, oh, well, that's how it's reserved, so that's what we can settle it for. That at least that's how my initial thinking was. And I don't know how you fix it, or whether it's like having, workshops with the carriers and the attorneys and kind of explain the process to the benefit of the younger attorneys.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I've thought that too. I was the same way when I first started. I'm coming out of law school. I'm literally handed a file, like, and I have no idea what a reserve is. I couldn't have told you anything really about it. You start to learn that, but I've always wondered. We always have attorneys come in and talk to us, right? They give seminars, they give proposal, whatever, new things on the law, case law changes, etc. Have they ever thought about having somebody from their insurance carriers come talk to them as to why this is important, why this is, what we do, and have them understand that? I think it would be a really good kind of discussion back and forth. I think it, again, strengthens the relationship, but it helps young attorneys, like you said, because look, we know a lot of associates do a lot of the work. Let's just be honest. And, when they're looking at stuff, for them to understand that, I think is really important because, yeah, I think most of the partners probably have because they've been doing this for a while and whatever, but young associates, for them to get that kind of education, I think would be huge. And yeah, again, whether it's taking a class, even like a small CPCU kind of thing. I have my CPCU. I got that when I was doing claim stuff, but not saying they have to get through CPCU, but just maybe even taking an insurance kind of class like that, just to kind of understand the basics of it, I think would go a long way for them. And I think it would help them in their careers as they move forward, because again, it would make them better attorneys working with carriers to understand how that works.
Well, and I think it just at the very outset, it's a benefit for at least a younger attorney. If they understand the business a little bit better, they can better serve those clients and they can stand out a little bit more.
No
They're
question.
not just running. I mean, and I get it. Like when you're first starting out, you don't totally even know what you're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I literally,
my first day, I literally, other than, the figuring out where everything was in the office and meeting everybody or whatever, I was handed 2 files and like basically figure it out. Here's the complaint, here's the, and again, that's just kind of, you get thrown to the wolves. And, especially when you're an defense litigation associate, we all know it's just, you're just, that's what you do. And you, sometimes you got to fend for yourself. And again, if I wish I had learned a little bit more about insurance at that time. And so again, I would encourage, firms that are out there to really kind of what you said, kind of help educate younger folks of understanding that side of the business. Because again, I think it'll help them, and make them better as they move forward, and they'll move quicker. And it can't help but help the firm, develop with that client relationship.
And another thing that it just stands out to me is something that I think, at least on the younger outset, you don't really know, is the level of authority your adjuster has in their hands, and what levels they have to go up to get additional authority. Because now I get it for most of my clients. I know where it all is, but say you're at your first mediation, you don't totally understand how that process works, and you don't know, like, well, we can't go above X amount because then Joe is going to have to call his boss, and Joe doesn't want to call his boss.
No.
So, but that isn't really taught early on, or at least it wasn't to me. Maybe there's other people who were taught that early on, but it took me a few years to figure that part out. And I think that also goes a long way with client relationships, because you don't ever want your adjuster to look bad either. Like
you don't, right? Because they're the ones going to be sending you the file. No, I think it's right. I mean, I've seen it depends on the size of company, to be honest with you. We're kind of a super regional size carrier. Our levels of bureaucracy, if you want to call it, are probably not the same as somebody who's, the much larger carriers, right? And my group handles different levels, of course. But, when we go to a mediation, we want to make sure whoever's there has the authority that they're going to need that day. Very rarely do I want to get that phone call, because I trust my team to make those decisions. And even if, they don't want to, and I'm fine with the call, right? But, for counsel to understand that too, like, I think it's really important, because you're going in there as a team. But at the same time, there's times when I don't want counsel to know what the authority is, because, I want them to work for it. Let's just be honest, because if I give example of, let's say I give $100,000 authority, and the attorney's going to know that, they're going to look, when you put a number out there like that, it is human nature that I have up to $100,000 to settle it. If I get it for $100,000, that's a really good thing, right? In my mind, true, but if you worked a little bit, could you get it for a little bit less? So it is an interesting dynamic when you go to mediation, especially now with the Zoom stuff. You're not in the same room. You can't have those, they have the separate rooms, but it's just not quite the same.
No.
As that. But yeah, understanding, kind of that authority thing. But again, we try to, whenever we have somebody go, they have the ultimate authority of what they're going to get, and they know what that's going to be. And if it's not, then they're not going to make that phone call, at least at that point in time. But it is kind of a delicate situation. I understand that.
Yeah. And I think that is a good point, though, about not always letting your attorney know what the full amount is, because I think it's a mental thing in a way. And if you just take that blockage out, and they're not focused on that number, they can get you over here.
in their mind, if they have that authority and they get it for within that authority, they've done a good job. And to be honest, they probably have. But could they do a better job
Yeah.
by pushing to try to get it a little bit lower, like, push the mediator a little harder, or, have an outside, ex parte communication with the, we always call out, hey, can I have a separate conversation with the plaintiff's attorney or whatever? Like, look, I'm telling you, I'm sitting in this room with Megan, and Megan's not going to pay that. And I'm telling you, if you really want to get this done, this is what it's going to be, and push it, rather than, hey, you know what, I think I can get Megan to jump up to 100 grand if your client, it's just that, it's that mindset of I think of it. Again, I think attorneys think they're doing a really good job when they get stuff within the reserve, and they are. I'm not saying they're not, but if you really want to impress me and you really want to, drive and show me that you're willing to push, doing what you can to get it under that, it kind of makes a difference in my mind.
Yeah. And I think that's so true, because I mean, obviously, like, I know whenever I'm trying to settle a case, I always want to settle it under authority, even if it's like $500 under authority. Like, I just want it to be under, because there's optics to that. And, and sometimes sometimes it's hard, or sometimes, the case is going to settle for X and you get Y, which is 10,000 less than X. And you just know it's not, it's not going to get there. And by some miracle of nature, you get it done for the max. But I mean, every case is different, but your goal should always, at least my goal is always to get it under, because
and I appreciate that. There are times you're not, right? I mean, there are times it's not going to happen. In my group's going to have to make the decision on the carrier side. You know what? We're just not going to take that risk, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, from my perspective, I understand that. My team understands that. From when I look for attorneys, I don't want somebody to feel bad about that, right? Because it's ultimately my team's decision. Counsel's trying to put me in the best position and give me their expertise, insight, or whatever, and I have to make that call. And it's okay, right? But it's just those ones where all of a sudden, where somebody comes and tells me, you know what, you're gonna need an extra $100,000. that doesn't fly with me.
And that might be the last time you work with that attorney.
Yeah, that's the problem for me. That's the one that always gets me. Because like what happened in the period of like an hour that changed that.
Well, and that's just the thing. Like, if you're at that point at mediation, you should your case. There aren't any huge surprises. There shouldn't be. I mean, sure, there are outliers. Maybe something happened. I don't know, but
the only outlier is usually somehow the plaintiff's attorneys all of a sudden will drop, here's an extra 50 to 75 grand in meds that, oh, by the way, we just found, or there's another 100,000 in lost wages that all of a sudden has appeared out of nowhere, right? And then my question is always like, well, why am I hearing about this now? Is there anything we could have done to have gotten that information before, so I'm not coming into the mediation getting blindsided by this? Because then that puts us on the defensive, and then it's never a good thing. But it happens. I mean, we all know, we've all been in that mediation when it's done. It's just a matter of making sure that when we get there, before that, 99% of the time we've got everything, so we have a full evaluation of what we have.
Yeah, and it's not going to come in that it's X over. I mean, there are of course times that I've been sitting in mediations that I've evaluated the case at a certain number. The client's on board with that number. The plaintiff's always at their number, and sometimes the mediator comes higher than your number, and they sometimes, and maybe it's not too far off, but it sometimes it becomes apparent, like, no, like we're not going to get, like, even though this is our number and I think it's fairly evaluated, sometimes it just, your number, it's not getting there. And a lot of times the mediators sometimes can do disservice with it a little bit too when they put that number on it, because then it gets
it is. There's always this thing of, I completely agree. The mediator's proposal, right? That's always an interesting dynamic. But yeah, if you get in there and you get a mediator that gives a number higher, because that you'd like to think the mediator went into the other side and said, all right, I think it's this, and they're coming into yours and they're saying it's this, right? And you're trying to get to that middle thing. But I'm always concerned is the mediator giving them this false sense of what they think it is. Again, it's one person's view of the case who's read this briefs for, a day, maybe, looked through it all and trying to do some evaluation. And again, ultimately I'd love to be a mediator at some point in time in my later part of my career, but that's what their job is. And it's tough. It's a tough gig to try to do it because you're not looking at the witnesses. You don't know how everybody's going to play and all that. They're just trying to get a value on it. But when they put that higher number on it, it does put you in a difficult position because the expectations on the other side then raise, and then you're farther apart, honestly, sometimes than you even were. So, sometimes the mediator proposals are good things, sometimes they're not, but it does at least put people on the clock, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you at least have some idea of, kind of what the other side may be thinking. So
Yeah.
I've seen mediators proposals work both ways. It's been a good thing. Hey, let's get to it. Especially when it's been a really good mediator who's really hammered both sides on the case, and like this is where I think it's going to be, and it puts a number out there that I'm like, man, I really have to think about that. Like the downside could be there. I've got to think about the policyholder. Does this make a lot of sense? Too many times I worry that the plaintiff's attorneys, again, coming from a defense side, although I clerked for a plaintiff's firm when I was in law school, but you come in from the defense side or the plaintiff side of the house, they've given these expectations to their clients. I think that's always part of the problem too. Oh yeah, I can get you this amount of money. And then when that amount of money is not coming, then that creates a problem with an expectation. So that's why, there's certain plaintiff attorneys that can be difficult to work with like that.
Oh, sure. And and you have to know the players that you're working with too. And that's why choosing mediator is very important because, and sometimes it's hard, or I think a lot of times it's hard because you have to understand the back relationships and between that
Sure.
could be there. But then if you're trying someone completely new, you don't know. So I think it's a difficult process to kind of navigate through, or a very important process to navigate through.
It is, and a lot of times the mediators are retired judges, or I always love the one where you find out the plaintiff went to law school with the guy, or the woman that's the mediator now. She worked in the firm. There's all kinds of relationships. So being able to understand that, because you see that happen all the time. So yeah, I think in a mediator, especially depending on the type of case, I think you're trusting your counsel to have done research, understand the mediator, the background, whether he or she is, what that relationship is, and are they the right person for this case? It's
Right.
a difficult case. There's a lot of sympathy in a case, let's say, right? Are they going to be able to work through that when, sympathy versus liability? I don't have very much liability, but I've got a very injured, or, the plaintiff has passed away, and there's a lot of, emotion in that situation, and being able to kind of work through that emotional part of it to do it it's a skill, to be honest with you. And so trying to find the mediator that's able to do that, especially on a really difficult case, I think is sometimes, it can make or break a case, just to be honest with you, as far as whether you're going to get it resolved.
And also being mindful of going to the mediator that usually handles like the very high exposure cases, and say you don't have such a high exposure case, they might already put a higher number on it out of just pure, like, it's just what they normally are used to seeing, these multi-million-dollar cases. And then you have this, smaller sprain, strain, or whatever it could be, and they might attach larger numbers to it just because that's the norm for them. So, that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
So I want to back up a little bit though. So back when you were working as a litigator and you were cutting your teeth, in the courtroom, can you think back now to one of those, early on embarrassing moments that you're like, oh man, like, how is this happening to me right now?
Oh man, it's been so long. I try to block that stuff out. I'm trying to think. It's one of those, the first time you go in front of, probably the first couple of times you actually go in front of a judge. I've done that where, especially like we used to go and do trial settings a lot or whatever. And I remember one time we were trying to do a trial setting, and literally, I think I gave the judge a date that was prior to the date that I was actually at. Like, I don't remember what it was, like, because I had like the partner's calendar, and I remember the judge kind of looked at me, and so he's like, so you want me to set the trial a week before today, or something like that? And I mean, it was very early on, and and there were a lot of lawyers in the in the courtroom because it was a docket call or whatever. And I was like, oh man, that's a good, so I just always stuck with me because it was so early. So early on, but it's, as a young attorney, it was nerve wracking sometimes to be in and do that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of another one. One time I actually was in a court and we had a witness come in that we were going to use as an expert. We did not think he was going to, I had not done the deposition, and to be honest, the deposition probably needed some work, but we're trying to establish this person as an expert. And so somehow the plaintiff's attorney was smart enough, and I wasn't ready for it, to be honest with you. They brought that person in to testify live. And so then me trying to rehabilitate that witness, it didn't go great. Luckily, I think the jury got the gist of what I was trying to do. It was a property damage thing, and they were able to kind of figure it out. But man, I was floundering, and it just got worse. And the judge was I could tell the judge was being super nice. He was trying to get there. He was like, just say the right thing and I'll certify this person, but anyway, it didn't hurt. But I remember thinking, like, I'm never going to be in that situation where you can't not expect something to happen. And I just didn't expect. The plaintiff's attorney was smart enough. They went and subpoenaed the witness. Witness came in. I was shocked when they walked in because I had actually talked to the witness a couple of days before, and they were like, no, I'm not going to, so it was just a matter of, I learned quickly that at that point you got to be ready for anything in a trial. And, luckily it didn't hurt the client, but it was a mistake on my part. Learned from it, and vowed never to do that again.
Well, and with those things, those things you're only probably going to learn when you're in that scenario too. And unfortunately, I think it's difficult for younger attorneys to get that experience, because how often is the client willing to let the associate go to trial over the partner? I mean, there's a lot at stake. If you're actually going to trial, which, let's face it, does not happen very frequently, and you're having all those costs of them going to trial, I think sitting in your shoes, you're like, no, I don't want the second-year associate going to trial. I don't care what kind of case it is.
It was. So the first one I did, I had it was a small trial, it was auto claim intersection accident, and I think I was out about maybe a year and a half. Damages weren't high, and actually this would have honestly was a perfect case for an associate, to be honest with you. Like, there was really no chance for anything big. The damages weren't, it was just, and I remember I did it all myself, and the partner helped me on the background, but he's like, look, I'm going to let you, which was great. I'm going to let you do this. So I ran through the whole thing, and that I felt good, because you're right. These are clients. We're servicing, carriers that are clients, and, you screw something up, that creates problems. So there's that added pressure. But, luckily, the partner let me do it, and got a great result at the time. And so, given that confidence, I think, again, I don't know how often now I've been out of the loop so much, but yeah, do I want a second-year associate? But again, depends on the case. If I'm trusting the partner that they've hired a really good associate, that they think that this is the right, that he or she can try this case and get the result, I got to trust them a little bit at the same time, because I think they understand their reputation on the line. Because something goes wrong, I'm going to go back to, hey, Megan, why was Jay trying this case at blah, 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 when you knew the exposure was there, and now we've got an issue. But, it's a very fine line of it. But having practiced, I do understand, been in the shoes of a young associate. I know that concern and how that is, because there are some really smart young associates out there that are going to make fantastic lawyers. And if you don't give them the opportunity to learn, you're going to lose that knowledge and experience going forward. And so again, it's got to be the right case. There's certain files that I'm like, no way, no how. I don't mind, obviously, them working on it or whatever, but at the end of the day, who's trying it, who's doing all that. But again, it kind of depends on the case. But I don't have a problem sometimes if a young associate, again, a small case that I know, I'm not going to get hit from anything big. Why not give them a shot?
Yeah. And I agree. But I also think from a learning standpoint, like for the larger cases, the partner may be trying it, but I think it's so important for an associate to be there to learn the process and maybe give them a witness. That's how it was always done with me, is that, you would because there's something about being on trial and the pressure and how everything gets thrown at you that you need to experience to be able to prepare for it for the next time, to understand how things kind of flow. And I know for several years, like, the partner I was working with, but when I would go with her on trial, and I would be I'd be the little bitch, and I'd have to run
Yeah.
around and do everything.
No,
But that's how you
absolutely.
learn.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I did that. Actually, the first trial I ever attended, so to speak, is I was actually a law clerk. And I didn't get to actually, like, obviously question witnesses, but I literally went through the whole thing, did the documents, have everything prepared, went through, did a listing of the questions we were going to ask and all that. And then when I was doing an associate, I did it a couple of times too. And again, watching how this reacts, watching the jury was actually extremely helpful for me. Like, as witnesses were up on the stand, you watch how the jury reacted either to your attorney, to your partner or plaintiff's attorney or anything, just the whole thing of being in the arena, if you want to call it, or the room. You learn a ton just watching. And I absolutely encourage, again, to have them, again, question a witness, even if it's just a fact witness that you're literally reading the list of questions, what's coming. That feeling of standing in front of a jury, I'll never forget the first time I did it. I mean, I was nervous as hell. But just to kind of calm those nerves and get them used to that situation is a huge benefit, both to again, from my perspective, it's a really good firm and we want to do a lot of work with them. I want to develop a relationship with those associates to where, I feel comfortable that if Megan got a case for me, I can trust Megan to do it, because that partner, let's be honest, can move on, can retire, all kinds of different things. You got to be prepared to move pretty quickly in my world.
Yeah, and it's that I'm glad you brought up that point, because it's something I've talked to some other people about that, and I'm curious to hear your take on it. That sometimes I've noticed that there's been this evolution that there's a lot of protectiveness over clients. So sometimes the younger associates aren't getting that client face to face. I don't know if it's people are worried about them later taking clients away from them. But I feel personally that it's a poor way to go for that exact reason. Like, that partner might retire, you want to keep the business relationship. You want the clients to get to know all the attorneys working with you, so they trust them, and it keeps that relationship going.
Yeah, that familiarity is huge. Because let's be honest, I mean, a lot of times my claims team is talking to the associates a lot. And again, part of it, there's never going to be a situation that I've seen where I've never personally seen where an associate tried to steal a client. I just never have seen that. Now, I'm sure it happens or whatever. I don't know. Maybe the attorneys we retain, they've had these conversations, but it is. Yeah. It's part of what I think the defense bar struggles a little bit, to be honest with you, compared to the plaintiff's bar. Is the defense counsel, there are a handful of clients, so to speak. I mean, there's carriers, right? And they're all kind of trying to fight for it or whatever. And, I don't know how much collaboration there is sometimes between firms, which would be helpful. We can get into that a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, you want to trust the young associates again. But there is that underlying thing. And there are just some people that are paranoid about that. And to me, that if you're paranoid with that, then you're not worried about doing your own job. You're more worried about appeasing a client rather than the job. As I would say, if you're an attorney and you're doing a good job, you're doing what I'm asking you to do, this and that, the chances of you losing me as a client are very, very low unless something really crazy happens, right? If people would just stick to, I tell my own people, they're always potentially, hey, I want to move up into a job, I want to do this or that. Do your job. If you do your job, it will work out. And so the theory that I'm going to say, could I go to an associate and say, hey, it's a small case, but I would go to the partner first and say, look, I got a really small case here. I don't want to spend a lot of expense. I don't think it's going to be a lot. Can I go to Megan? Megan's done a really nice job. Do you care if I just have Megan handle this and you can maybe oversee it or whatever? But honestly, I need your focus on these two other wrongful death cases versus a small rear end claim that may be $25,000. And so I understand that dynamic in a firm. Obviously, I've been in a defense firm or whatever, and as associates get, more experience, you get the 4th, 5th year associates. They're looking to make partner. How do I make partner? I got to bring in business.
Mm-hmm.
That starts to happen, but that's something you gotta watch. But again, as I tell my panel counsel and firms, if you do your jobs, we'll work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also just goes to the trust of like their trust of their team,
Sure.
and like, look, these people, if they're your clients, you're trusting them, like, your relationship is with them, but you also want to be able to, trust their whole team.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and we're like during your younger years as a practicing attorney, and then when you moved over to the claims side, did you have any mentors that kind of helped guide you along the way?
Let's see. Honestly, from the partners side of the house, I don't want to get too. The partners that I had, it was again small insurance defense firms. We all call them mills. We run through them all and whatever. They're worried about your billables and all that. I mean, you learn some things here and there, kind of some techniques. Probably when I got a little bit more on the claim side, I had some folks, that kind of mentored me, kind of as I moved along thinking about it, and especially as I moved on to leadership roles, that's really where I think the mentoring really starts to take place. You learn a lot about yourself because, everybody, I want to be in a leadership role. I want to do this or that. And then when you get into that role, you think it's one way, and I'm telling you, it is not what you think it's going to be. And so, I had a couple of folks that luckily they let me kind of find my way. And I think that was a really good thing. And I've tried to help my team do that too, because you can't be afraid to fail. And so we're all going to make those mistakes. So as I think of mentors, I had a couple, early on in my claims world. And then even more recently, probably, my current boss has done a great job kind of mentoring me through this. I've taken on a bigger role under him over the last 5 years. And really, I had some things about my leadership style, to be honest with you, I needed to change. And, and he wasn't afraid to tell me about it. I think that's one thing I learned is don't be afraid to have that conversation with somebody, even if it's a difficult conversation. Takes a little bit. It's a little bit of a hit to your ego and all that, but it makes you better. And so I've been able to kind of work through that, and so hopefully at some point, as I start to help other young claims folks move in and that, I can kind of pass it along. But it's just there's so many different personalities you meet along the way, and I think you take some even from the bad, if you want to say I don't want to do that, or I still think there's an opportunity to learn from everybody. So I've had so many different bosses, leaders throughout the thing that I've been able to learn from. And I try to take a little bit, again, good and bad from each one of them to kind of mold myself, but I'm still working at it. Trust me, I got a long way to go still.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm curious what you needed to work on.
Well, it's funny. And honestly, to be honest with you, the lawyer thing probably got in the way a little bit from a standpoint of, hey, I'm a lawyer. I know what I'm doing. I was young. And, sometimes when I think through things, one of the things I think that benefits me in my role now, having done that, is I do think a little bit differently than maybe some people. Strategy wise, thinking strategically, you need to think about these. I think a lot of times people get caught up in the facts and they don't get caught up with like, what's the instruction going to say? What's the jury? Those kind of things that I think helps. But what it did for me sometimes is I didn't always listen to others. I didn't always get a different point of view. I thought, I know what I'm doing or whatever. And so, people called me out on it, and they rightly did. And so, because there are smarter people than I am, right? And I needed to recognize that and let them have a voice, because in a leadership role, part of what I learned in a leadership role is that you're probably better off having smarter people than you on your team, especially in different areas. And you just need to be wise enough to listen to them. You may not agree with them. And I've told my team, I may not agree with you, but I'm going to listen to everything you say. And so again, that's part of what my evolution has been. And I would say the same thing to like attorneys out there, partners. Like, yeah, you've been doing this a heck of a long time, but that associate may know something or have seen something, and you need to listen to them and be willing to put aside your ego or whatever. Even if the client looks at it and says, well, wow, I can't believe Megan didn't think of that, but Jay thought of that. that's okay. I mean, if you show some humbleness and humility in that, I think it makes you better. And again, as a leader, I've learned that. Am I still working on it? There's still moments when I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I don't, yeah, but I can tell you that that's been much less than in the past. And again, it's still something from an evolution side. But again, I think the lawyer thing probably caused that for me a little bit. And for a long time, I was a lawyer in claims. Now I'm a claims person, I would say, that's still a lawyer. It's just kind of a different mindset. And part of it's just because it's different learning of the business, but whatever. But, it's a different thing as you move into leadership roles that you've got to learn. And you're still working on. I'm still working on.
And I think that's a great point, though, because I think I think all attorneys, we all think, we know a lot, but you never know everything, and like listening to others is so helpful. I mean, even now, I can't even think how many times I get someone else in my office on the phone to run through a case with, because, I like to have someone else's input on it, because I don't want just my eyes on it, because they might see something that I don't, and vice versa. I mean, and I don't care if it's an associate or another partner. And I'll even run it through like my husband, who's not an attorney, or like other people or staff, because everyone sees things a little bit differently.
Funny you say that. So actually, once in a while, we have days where we have like our large loss claim roundtables, and we go over big stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'll have one at the dinner table. And my wife and daughters will sit there, and I don't get too deep into it, but I run them a fact scenario. Like, we call it the claim of the day. What was the claim of the day? And I'll run it through, because they get a different perspective. I think of it from a legal perspective, and I think of it from an insurance claims background. We always talk about it. Like, how about somebody who's just on the street, who's going to be your juror,
exactly,
even if they're 15 years old? My daughter's pretty dang smart. She gets it. How are they going to view this situation? And it's an interesting dynamic. And again, the more you can get that input, opinion, the better I think you're gonna be. And again, we try to do that when we have our roundtables. We have a lot of people that are part of those discussions, because they may have different ideas, especially people that are in claims that are not on the claim, but maybe they've had a claim similar or whatever. And I encourage my team. A lot of times I think people, when they think of like a roundtable, it's really like the top couple people are making that decision, and they are. But other people, probably in other companies, maybe are afraid to speak up, where we encourage it. We encourage people to have that conversation. And, at the end of the day, ultimately, it's my decision on what we do for the most part. But, like I said, in the past, maybe I wasn't listening as much as I am now. And I think it's made me better. And I think it's made us better as a company, to be honest with you. Because it helps your team. Like, my input matters. My thoughts matter. Jay's listening to me as to what I'm thinking, and it's going to make them better. Because if not, they're just going to be like, well, Jay's going to make this decision anyway. Why am I bothering with it? I asked for their recommendations. I asked for all this information now before I will even say a word, because I don't want anything that I say to affect the way they think that they want to. Hey, I want to kind of, you want to agree with the boss, so to speak.
Right.
And I don't want that. I don't need that. I don't need to, I don't need somebody to do that. I need somebody to tell me if I'm wrong or they think differently. Again, I may not agree, but I need them to tell me that.
And I think that's such a good point too. And I also it creates a much more open culture, because not really anything good comes out of always being agreed with and not pushed. I mean, and they think about it on your side too. I'm sure you push your team to on their recommendations. Why? Why are you here? You push your attorneys. Why did you come up with this? So why can't you be pushed too? So, I mean, it just, you have to be, otherwise you're always going to do the same thing every time. And that's not the answer. You have, I mean, each case is a little bit different. There's so many different factors that come into it that you should be pushed on it to back up your reasoning. I
think that's right. I think one of the things that we strive here at State Auto is our culture. I mean, we are very open and transparent, and again, having these kind of discussions, it's actually been super refreshing, to be honest with you, for the last few years of what our culture has become, and it's opened it up. But yeah, you're right. I want them to push me. Like, the first question I ask is when somebody's done, like, what do you want to do? What's your recommendation? What's your strategy? I get frustrated with my own team, and the same thing with counsel. They just throw up all this information on me and kind of look at me to be like, what do you want to do? And to me, that's not what I'm paying them for, both sides of the house. And I need them to come up with a strategy. This is what I think. You're the one who's closest to it. I'm hearing the claim maybe year and a half after it's happened, right? They're coming to me for that authority. They know the claim so much better than I do. I'm getting like a 30-minute view of it. So why wouldn't I trust the person that's been handling it for a year and a half, or the attorney that's been handling it for a year and a half, 2 years? They're going to be so much closer to it than I am. But I want them to think strategically about it. And then I want them to give me that recommendation is what they think we should do. Again, I may not agree with it. I may question it. But to have that thought process makes me feel like they know what they're talking about. They know this claim. I feel comfortable with the work that they've done. If it's an attorney, are they prepared to try that case? That always worries me a lot when an attorney comes to me and is like, oh, it's 50-50. Everything in life's 50-50. I wake up every day, is it 50-50? I'm getting up. I mean, I get it. You may lose. I'm okay with that. I mean, I've lost. I want somebody who's willing to give me a strategy and what they think. And again, I'll make that decision. And the more that I hear from that, the more that I'm going to actually trust them going forward, that they're thinking the right thing. They're doing what I need them to do from a job perspective. And I'm much more likely to hire an attorney that thinks that way than somebody who's just, okay, I'm just trying to get this to a settlement. That's not the mindset. Again, I know that their first priority and our first priority is always to the policyholder, first and foremost. There's no question about that. But at the same time, I got to think through, these different scenarios. And I need somebody who's thinking strategically and has a plan, and gives me a recommendation. Again, I may not agree with Megan. If you had a case for me and you came and said, Jay, I think you need to pay this. And I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm not sure that I'm willing to do that. Okay, we agree to disagree, but then I just need you to continue to push forward in that scenario. I understand the risk. I think attorneys often, they're afraid to lose. They don't want to be on that Lawyers Weekly with, that large verdict sitting out there because, look, none of us like to lose. I hate losing more than anything, but I'm not afraid to. And so, the more I can think strategically with my team and give me recommendations, the more I'm going to listen to them and trust them. And when I say team, it's everybody, the claims persons, the attorneys handling the file. That's to me the collaboration that you need. And again, you're going to win a lot, you're going to lose some, but you just got to understand that that's just kind of the nature of where we are right now with the business.
Yeah, and I mean, I talked to a lot of colleagues and stuff about this. I mean, from our perspective, from the attorney's perspective, I mean, our job is to evaluate and advise.
Yep.
And, we can evaluate and assess it and give you our best recommendation based on X, Y, and Z. And if you don't like our recommendation, then that's okay. I mean, and you can challenge me on it and we can discuss it, but my job is not just to tell you what you want to hear, because I'd be doing a very poor job if that's what I was doing.
No, you're spot on. Spot on. I don't want, again, we talked about it before. I don't need an attorney to tell me what I want to hear. I need he or she to tell me what they think and why. And then, I will say having the legal background, helping to it helps me have those discussions with them a little bit, because I do understand how the motion limit is going to affect and how all this different things. Instructions are huge. I don't think we talk enough in even our own carrier side of the house, how the instructions are going to read and how important it is from a jury perspective. But yeah, I need an attorney to say, you know what, this is a loser. I mean, you're going to pay a couple $1,000,000 or whatever. I'm okay with them telling me that. Now, does that mean that they shouldn't be ready to try the case? No, I don't think so. Like if I don't make that decision, but I need them to tell it like it is. And again, ultimately that decision comes to me. What I don't like is attorneys that try to make that decision for me. Again, I understand it's for the policyholder. They've got to do what they got to do to protect the policyholder. I get that. But I don't need them to try to drive me in a certain way that they think I should do it. I just need them to tell me what they think, and then I'll make that decision. And to me, that's what I look for with when we look at panel counsel, that they're not afraid to tell me the good and the bad, and because I've got to, I got to tell my boss the good and the bad too. It's not fun to tell the bad, but a lot of times, you or I are just the messenger.
Right.
It's nothing personal. I mean, that's the problem. Sometimes you get too personal. This is what it is. And we've got to figure out what we're going to do with that. And so that's why I laugh at that 50-50. that to me is like, and I'm sure you hear that a lot from carriers, but it really does me no good as far as trying to evaluate a case at that point. I'm like, really? Like, so if somebody's willing to take a stand and tell me yay or nay, I can live with that one way or the other, and I'll make that response. And again, they may not agree with me, but they'll work through it. We'll work through it.
Right. And I mean, as for, venue, like 50-50, I mean, venue comes into it so much too. And from your experience, I mean, you guys are nationwide, aren't you? I think
we're not quite nationwide. We've got, I think we're in like 34 states or something like that. I'd have to check, to be honest with you. It's depending on our lines of business that we're in.
Yeah.
We wrote some excess and surplus lines. We're not in that business anymore, but that was nationwide for us. But yeah, venue is a huge issue.
Right. So you've had a taste of a fair amount of the venues
Yes.
out there. And, are there, and I know I have my gut feelings, but are there some venues that you're like, oh God, hell no, like this is a nightmare? Or, like I have one, like Philly to us is like,
Sure.
terrible. The judges aren't going to make thoughtful decisions. Your jury is probably not going to be in your favor.
Sure.
Although the recent stats actually show that it's not as terrible as everyone thinks.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah, you still have a problem with the judges. I think that you're not going to get.
Yeah, I think obviously the judicial hellholes are all out there.
Yeah.
Florida to me is a struggle. It just doesn't feel like you can catch a break down there. I know they're struggling right now with property side of the house with rates and everything because of verdicts and everything going down there. I don't know what it is. That just hasn't always been the best. Some of the areas in South Texas can be tough, as you know. But they're just, it's weird how different counties are. It's a demographic kind of situation, and you just got to understand that. I don't want to be scared of any county because I do think there are good people that'll make the right decision in the county, but I do think you realize that. I mean, obviously Cook County is always on the list. West Virginia, I think it's actually West Virginia's kind of gotten a bad rap, to be honest with you, in the past. But you kind of watch the judicial hellhole situations and do it. But at the same time, I always look at it. Do we look at venue? Absolutely. But at the same time, I got to feel if I have the right facts and the right situation, I can't be afraid to do it, because then why write any business in that venue?
Right.
And that's one of the things we always look at. But there are a few out there that always give me a little bit of pause. Luckily, we don't really write much in Florida anymore. So, but that hasn't been the kindest place for me.
Well, and I do feel the venue comes into play more so on a motion and judicial decision aspect than jury. Because again, like, do cases go to trial? Yes, but more often than not, there's motions, and like, especially like I think about motions for summary judgment or something. Like there's some counties that you're like, oh, don't even bother. You could have the best motion in the world, and if someone responds, then you're automatically going to get it denied. So that's kind of where I factor in venue more so, is like, if I have to file motions, how are they going to be considered? And am I going to get reasonable or fair decisions on these?
Yeah, I think when you look at, and that obviously goes by how the judges are appointed. Are they elected? Are they appointed? Or, all that stuff, because obviously if it's an election, constituents, and, I mean, it makes a huge difference. So again, some judges are willing to do it. We've tried to, especially now during COVID, with all the courts being closed. Our hope, tried to file some more motions for summary judgment, because it's an opportunity for these judges to move cases that, get them off their dockets and kind of work through. But it is tough when you feel like you've got a really good, even on a liability claim, a slip and fall, that you feel like, man, this is a no-brainer. It's amazing to me how many times they get through summary judgment motions. But yeah, I agree. I think when you look at that, you're right. From a jury perspective, how many cases we took, we actually were in a pretty good pace last year from a jury trial perspective through the first quarter until everything shut down. But again, the percentages of cases that actually get to the jury or not. So the judges really do make a huge difference there. So that's what I always encourage my counsel to give me as much information about the judge that we can, because it does have an effect. Is this judge going to lean plaintiff's side, down the middle? What was the history? How were they elected? All that, how many times have they been overturned on appeal? All that stuff. It makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's something I think sometimes gets some people tend to overlook, but the more you know about them, then you can really, navigate things accordingly. So we're almost out of time, but I had some I guess more fun follow-up questions. So, and as a little bit of background, I've been doing a little bit on this podcast. I've been starting this 10 question format too, which we didn't really do today, but I have some questions that I like to ask some of my guests in that 10 question format that is always a little fun.
No pressure, rapid fire. We'll see how it goes.
No, they're easy. So if there's a movie that you could watch over and over again, what movie is that?
Probably Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, even though you know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I tell you what, when I was younger, it was Star Wars. I was a Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
But no, there's just something about that movie. Like every time it's on, I can remember the first time I saw it. It doesn't matter to me. I know everything about it, and I don't know. I just think the message of that movie is really good. An unfortunate situation, men ultimately, wrongfully accused, all that stuff, and just the lessons of friendship, survival, and all that. And then the end of it's just fantastic for me. Yeah. But it's one of my favorites, and I can always watch The Godfather too. I actually just flipped it on last night. There it was, so I watch it no matter where it is. But yeah, I think those are probably two if you had to do it. And I also, it's kind of funny, The Magnificent Seven, the old version with Yul Brynner. I will watch it all the time. My wife gets really upset with me if it's on, but it's actually probably my favorite movie as far as that and Shawshank would be the two.
Well, yeah, those are new ones. I did this with my partner, and he was like, "Oh, I think the whole Marvel series." I'm like, "That's 13 movies."
I watch those with my girls. I will say that my daughters are 15, 11, and we love the Marvel stuff, and we watch them all, and we've seen them all together. We go whatever. That would be if I'm hanging out with my kids, I'm watching those with them. But if it's just me and I'm kicking back and something coming on, it's probably say Magnificent Seven or Shawshank.
So what about hobbies? When you're finally home, with your family or without your family, do you have any hobbies that you like to partake in?
I like to play golf when I can. Luckily, I was just actually on a little trip with some friends. I used to play a lot of golf, probably 2-3 days a week. And then obviously marriage, kids, and real life and all that stuff does that. Again, I spend a lot of time with my girls doing stuff. But I say probably from a hobby perspective, it's something golf. I love to play, and it gets me out. I can go relieve stress. I love to go to the driving range and just hit ball after ball, trying to picture certain people maybe as the golf ball, but it's just part of it. And then again, hanging out, just family time, especially with COVID, it's really kind of been my hobby for everybody, right? Yeah. You become even more so with your family. So.
And do your daughters play golf too?
No, they don't. My 15-year-old, she plays softball, but I've tried to get her to play golf. She has zero patience. She's a perfectionist, and if she doesn't hit 4 balls straight, she will, she's done, and she knows it. And I've tried and tried. She actually could be a pretty good player, but she doesn't have the patience to do it. My 11-year-old, maybe she's not into athletes. She's a theater, dancer, piano. She's artsy and fantastic at it. And, we take her to Topgolf and she does it, but she has the patience and the mentality to do it. She just maybe not real interested in the sports part of it.
It's one of the things, my parents both played golf, and they always, when I was a kid, they had me take golf lessons every summer. Yeah. I was a tennis player though, and I didn't have much patience for golf. And now I'm so annoyed at myself that I didn't keep it up, because I would probably actually be okay if I had done it.
Softball, she's got a good swing. And I've told her this. I said, in 10 years, you're going to be mad at yourself that you didn't listen. Well, she never listens to me anyway, but you're going to really be mad at yourself when you didn't take it up, because again, I think she could be pretty good at it. And of course, I'm selfishly wanting her to do it so that I can play more golf and spend more time. Hey, honey, I got to go play golf with with Izzy's my daughter, and so we're going to be gone for 4 hours, and I get to play golf, and it's all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I had done it, and now it's funny because my husband plays golf once in a while, but he's not inviting any of us out to go with it.
Yeah, I kind of like. I will say I kind of like the away time a little bit. My wife doesn't play, so I do like a little bit of just kind of my being on my own a little bit with that. That's part of why I think I enjoy it so much.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I think we probably could have talked for another hour. I had probably another whole page of questions, but but I don't want to take.
Maybe we'll have a part 2.
Yeah.
That we'll figure it out. So no, I appreciate the invite, and I love what you're doing with this. I think it's really interesting and that. So again, I'm happy to be a part of it. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Megan.